In each of us, there is an urge toward adventure, a need to break from the everyday lives we've created for ourselves and explore an unknown world. The marine environment of the Baja Peninsula is just such a place. In the spring of 1941, author John Steinbeck and biologist Ed Ricketts boarded the Western Flyer to fill in, as they said, some of the gaps in the knowledge of the marine fauna around the Baja Peninsula of Mexico. The trip was immortalized in Steinbeck's book, Log from the Sea of Cortez. They set sail from Monterey, California. They proceeded down the Pacific side of the Baja Peninsula, rounding Cabo San Lucas, to explore the largely uncharted waters of the Sea of Cortez. 50 years later, naturalist Ron LaValley, a modern-day Ed Ricketts, led us on our own journey of discovery as we retraced the Steinbeck-Ricketts route. Our home for the next 12 days was the Searcher, a 90-foot boat with a crew of 7. It was near midnight when we departed from San Diego's Fisherman's Landing. After a night of restless sleep, we awoke to see an island off our bow. Islands, for the next 12 days, would be our main contact with terra firma. A boy from the island, Toto Santos, approached the Searcher. He was like a messenger telling us we were free to begin our adventure. The Searcher's 3 skiffs carried us to the island, where we began our first exploration. A seasonal fishing camp. The boy who greeted us at the boat had wanted some milk. A curious intercultural communication exists between we visitors and the island residents, as Steinbeck wrote in the log.
We do not know whether Mexicans are happier than we. It's probable that they are exactly as happy. However, we do know that the channels of their happiness or unhappiness are different from ours, just as their time sense is different. We can invade neither, but it is some gain simply to know that it is so.
Overlooking the bay was a single wooden cross, marking not a grave, but where someone had recently died. Probably someone from the fishing village. It was a Mexican custom that had pleased Steinbeck.
It seems good to mark and to remember for a little while the place where a man died. This is his one whole lonely act in all his life.
Toto Santos provided us with our first look at a sea mammal. The harbor seals, with their sad, puppy faces. The Pacific harbor seal is a true seal, 4 to 5 feet long. Their range is enormous, covering most of the northern coastal waters of the continent. They seem to have a guarded curiosity about our presence. The seal's behavior follows the ebb and flow of the tide, hauling out of the water during low tide to sleep or bask in the sun. From here, we would run 18 hours to our next destination. Like Steinbeck's boat, the Searcher traveled continuously at night until we reached the Sea of Cortez. By the next morning, we had traveled 225 miles to the island of San Benitos. Here was a much larger fishing village. It was in the village we met Chocolate, a dog who was determined to demonstrate his dominance over any animal larger than himself. This island is one of the most important habitats for the northern elephant seal. Because of its remoteness, a breeding population was able to survive here, while most of the seals were being hunted to near extinction. One of the reasons the elephant seals fared so poorly was their passive temperament. We had little difficulty approaching them. Though rather slow and cumbersome on land, they do possess a flexibility that would please any yogi. Their placid nature was demonstrated when Chocolate took off after a group of seals. It seemed obvious to all of us that one well-placed bite could make for the end of Chocolate. Yet none of the seals aggressively pursued him. Later, we reached a cove where we could see directly into the clear, shallow water. In the interior of the island were a number of osprey nests. At one point we wondered, is it some form of avian joke to incorporate old shirts and other human junk into their nests? Are they trying to tell us something? They who were almost exterminated by our careless passion for pesticides. Suddenly, a piece of the nest moves. We slowly wound our way to the far end of the island. There, an abandoned lighthouse beckoned us forward as thoughts of what was to happen the next day began to creep into our minds. Tomorrow, the searcher would enter San Ignacio Lagoon, the breeding and calving waters of the gray whales, and for us, the hope of touching one of these creatures of the ocean. It was late in the season, and our fear was they might be all gone, having already embarked on their 2,000-mile migration north to the Bering Sea. The morning came quickly. It was windy. There was an edge of excited anticipation as the first skiff, or panga as the Mexicans call them, arrived at the searcher. Here, we will pay to use their boats, and in return, they will not fish the waters when the whales are present. A bit of ecotourism at work. Word comes from the locals that as many as 100 whales are still in the lagoon. And then, without warning, there were gray whales around the searcher. The idea is to maneuver your panga in the neighborhood of one of these 45-foot giants, idle the engine, and hope the whales want to have contact. These so-called friendlies will then come up to the panga to be touched. Seemingly, these whales just wanted to tease us and say all good things come with patience. For soon they were gone, and it was a long time before spouts were seen again. The whales had concentrated at the mouth of the lagoon, in the roughest waters. Perhaps the arrival of a frigate bird on the mast of the Searcher was a signal our luck was about to change, as Captain Art Taylor monitored the progress of the three pungas.
Yeah, we're just getting up on the area where we've seen the blows. Should just be another minute here. Looks like there's quite a few animals out here. See a few cow-calf pairs. So it looks good, okay?
Oh, yeah.
I think they're working their way this way also. They're behind us a little ways. Oh, we've got a cow-calf pair close to the boat here. This might get interesting. Looks like they're going to be on the curious side. So let's hope so, okay?
Yeah, okay.
It's looking good here. Oh, coming up to the bow, up to the bow, up to the bow, the cow, there's the cow. Pet it. We're getting touchy-feelies now, okay?
Back in 1978, Ron LaValley was one of the first humans to touch a gray whale in the wild.
We were on the Searcher, and I was giving my evening seminar. I think I was doing the shorebirds of the lagoon, and the crew kept making a lot of noise in the back of the boat, and everybody would run out of the salon and go see what was going on. And there was a gray whale that was coming underneath the boat. But after a while, I started playing with the little inflatable boats that were behind the skiff, and one of the crew members and I got back into the boat, and when the whale came up to actually touch the skiff, we reached down and were able to touch it. It was an incredible experience, without a doubt. The next week, that whale came back during the daytime, and another whale joined it within the following year. Females with calves were involved, and the numbers have continued to grow. Touching a whale is it's an experience of interspecies communication in a way that there's no way to categorize it, there's no way to describe it properly. It's truly, truly exciting.
You like it, Iris?
Oh. No, she didn't like it at all. She wants her money back. She thought it was pretty just unfun. Sometimes you'd just be surrounded. They'd be on one boat, just, on both sides, coming up, going underneath, coming up on the other side. You were not excited at all. I couldn't get
They were in charge. We were just sort of there. It's like they were in charge. If they came over, they came over. If they didn't,
San Ignacio Lagoon has a feeling of familiarity to it, a place of returning, of home. Much of San Ignacio's shoreline is made up of wind-swept dunes. The whole ecosystem of the lagoon is protected by the Mexican government. A giant whale vertebrae reminds us of the time when this place was a bloodbath. The spirits of many slaughtered whales still linger here. Gray whales were once called devilfish for their fierce attacks on boats while protecting their young. But there were times when we were surrounded by 6 whales or more. They could easily have capsized our small boats.
Hi, guys.
Yet our sense was one of joy, never fear. At this time of year, it is only mothers and their calves that are left in the lagoon. It was perfectly clear that the mothers were showing their offspring that it was all right to approach humans. One particular cow, Fluffy, as we called her, and her calf, Spot, were easily recognized by their bright white barnacles and whale lice. Fluffy is an old friend of the searcher. She would patiently go from one ponga to the next, as if to make sure no one felt neglected.
Okay, folks, we gotta get out of here if we're gonna make it out before it gets dark, but we do have to depart so that we have enough daylight in order to make it across the bar safely.
Back on the searcher, as we sailed toward the mouth of the lagoon, a strange thing happened. 5 to 10 whales began to follow us, breaching and spy hopping. They were sending us a farewell message. Interspecies communication between us and the great whales was no longer speculation. It was a reality we were experiencing. The next day, everything had changed. We all came together as a group. There was a spirit of camaraderie and well-being that lasted for the rest of the trip. Our next goal was to see humpbacks and blue whales. From now until we reached the Sea of Cortez, we would constantly move south. Art Taylor has been captaining natural history trips since 1976. His job is much different than that of the skipper of Steinbeck's boat.
I would say that his navigational skills were probably a little bit more prehistoric due to the fact of the timing. There wasn't radars or satellite navigators or anything like that. So I would say that it would be like an uncharted adventure, not knowing what to expect. So I think that his job was a lot harder than mine. So basically he would just have to go, oh, excuse me, we have a whale, I think, here at 2 o'clock. So we're gonna turn that way.
At 2 o'clock was the powerful spout of a blue whale, the largest creature ever to grace the planet. A blue whale can grow up to 98 feet and weigh over 100 tons, the equivalent of 50 African elephants. are one of the rarest of the great baleen whales. The ones around us were exhibiting surface feeding behavior. They were eating tiny krill, which moved through the ocean like a red cloud. They tasted like ketchup to us. On the morning of the 7th day, we reached Cabo San Lucas, a land's end. Land's ends always held a special place in the heart of early adventurers. Rounding a cape like Good Hope or Horn always marked an end and a new beginning. With its condo-lined beaches and hills, no place has changed more in 50 years. When Steinbeck and Ricketts landed here, it was impossible for them to find a cold drink. Later that day, we entered the warm waters of the Sea of Cortez. Ceremoniously, the crew of the Searcher inaugurated the change. Here is where we found the rich tidal zones. They are primordial, the birthplace of complex life. The tidal zones, with their pools and rocky beaches, were the destination of Steinbeck and Ricketts. At places such as Agua Verde, Island San Francisco, and San Diego, they would wait for low tide, then rush in and turn over rocks to fill their collecting jars. Ed Ricketts was immortalized as Doc in Steinbeck's novel Cannery Row. It is interesting to think that he took two well-known writers on intertidal collecting trips. Steinbeck, and 10 years earlier, Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. It became for Campbell a journey that aligned the forces of nature with the classical myths of origin and the meaning of life. One of Steinbeck's favorite creatures was a crab, aptly named Sally Lightfoot.
Many people have spoken at length of the Sally Lightfoots. In fact, everyone who has seen them has been delighted with them. These little crabs with brilliant cloisonné carapaces walk on their tiptoes. They have remarkable eyes. They seem to be able to run in any one of 4 directions, but more than this, they appear to read the mind of their hunter. If you walk slowly, they move slowly ahead of you in droves. If you hurry, they hurry. When you plunge at them, they seem to disappear in little puffs of blue smoke. At any rate, they disappear.
We did no collecting. Our approach to the reefs and tidal flats was to snorkel. Snorkeling is an amazingly simple activity. Just by fitting a clear piece of glass over our eyes, we were introduced to an incredible new world. Every day, our swimming stamina improved and our skill at underwater maneuvers became more adept. Abilities that would pay dividends later, on the last day of our trip. Many of the larger, more interesting creatures were found at greater depths.
Orange starfish. Be careful with it. They have real poisonous spines.
The success of a trip like this, in large measure, falls on the group leader.
We've got something very exciting here. It's a taper nautilus.
Our leader, Ron LaValley, is somebody who Steinbeck would have enjoyed downing a drink with.
It's in its egg case right now. This is really neat.
Like Ed Ricketts, Ron's knowledge of nature and concern for people, steeped in boundless enthusiasm, was a potion no one on the trip could resist. As Steinbeck said of Ricketts,
The true biologist deals with life, with teeming, boisterous life, and learns something from it. Learns that the first rule of life is living.
it is a passage Ron has taken to heart.
And Ed Ricketts' impact on me was inspirational because, you know, the guy obviously enjoyed life and enjoyed being a part of life, not just an inactive observer. And I like to think of myself as being like that, you know.
Like Ricketts, Ron found himself unsuited to the dry world of academia. Yet both men found ways to make a living from their passions. Ed with his biological supply house, and Ron with Biological Journeys, a small company that specializes in marine adventure travel. Part of the job is naturalist, to show people things they would otherwise not see, and answer 1,000 questions.
This kind of travel is, for a long time, was lacking a name, this you know, soft adventure, in contrast to the river rafting, mountain climbing kind of expeditions where the purpose of the trip is testing your physical capabilities. You know, this natural history kind of trip is, you know, maybe in some ways, you know, challenging your mental capabilities and your, it's almost like going back to the hunt, you know, where you're trying to get your perception and your senses working, you know, the best way possible.
While it is true that each day had its own unique activities, the majority of our time was spent on board the Searcher. Many people have commented on the unique quality of the Baja landscape. Mystical and sacred. It is said the natives here live their lives closer to the dream world.
The whole surrounding land is unsubstantial and changing. One remembers the old stories of invisible kingdoms where princes lived with ladies and dragons for company. And the more modern fairy tales in which heroes drift in and out of dimensions more complex than the original three.
Once into the Sea of Cortez, the crew and some of the passengers began catching fresh fish for the evening meal.
Where do you keep the extra hooks?
Unless it was another grouper, another grouper. Yeah!
I got two in there, really?
I don't know, you got...
All right.
Dinner always seemed like a feast.
Everyone has their mugs?
Each night, we became a little more like family. Masks that hid us in our daily lives gradually came off. A bit, anyhow.
I smuggled aboard a little Chardonnay. So we don't get much, but we all get a little taste.
In the Gulf, half of each day was occupied with whale watching, or more appropriately, watching for whales. Most of whale watching time is spent scanning the horizon, looking for blows. Many a day of whale watching has to be satisfied with a seabird count. Whales are rare. They spend most of their time underwater, and the ocean is simply a big place, making them difficult to find. Twice we spotted Brutus whales, cow-calf pairs. Whales rarely stay on the surface long. 3 or 4 blows, and then they dive. A good captain can sense the direction the whale is traveling, and with luck, the boat will be somewhere in the vicinity of the next surfacing. A whale's dive can last anywhere from 2 to 15 minutes on average. Often a predictable pattern develops for their dive times. Down 7 minutes, up 30 seconds. There's a lot of waiting. It's a cat and mouse game.
Another footprint anyway.
This may go on for an hour or more, until we feel satisfied we've had a good look.
Look at that. Real big food.
We were also hoping to see fin whales and humpbacks, but never did. On previous trips into the Gulf, humpbacks had been commonly seen at this time of year. Our luck was pointed in another direction. Twice, we spotted the rare dwarf sperm whale, an 8-foot version of the giant sperm whale, the species portrayed in Herman Melville's novel Moby Dick. Unlike most whales and dolphins, these animals come to the surface and just sort of bob as they breathe. It was only in the mid-1970s that biologists distinguished this species at sea. It is possible we were closer to these animals in the wild than any other humans before us. At least twice a day, schools of dolphins would come rushing to the searcher. No matter what state we were in, their joy revitalized each and every one of us. They imparted to us a jolt of uplifting energy. Sometimes, they were the common dolphin traveling in schools of thousands. Other times, they were bottlenose dolphins. Common dolphins were the superior bow riders. Bottlenose, the best jumpers. The oceans have always symbolized our subconscious, from which reawakenings or rebirths come forth. Perhaps our newfound affinity for whales and dolphins represents a part of our being, a very fundamental part that has been buried for a long time and now is ready to emerge. These animals seem to know that they have a role to play in this reawakening of energies needed to take us into the future. Steinbeck had a sense that this was so.
They really came to us. We have seen them change course to join us, these curious animals. Of our crew, Tiny and Sparky, who love to catch every manner of fish to harpoon any swimming thing, would have nothing to do with porpoises. They cry so, Sparky said. When they're hurt, they cry to break your heart. We wonder whether the general seaman's real affection for porpoises might not be more complicated than the simple fear of hearing them cry.
Most of our whale watching and Steinbeck and Ricketts collecting was done in and around the islands of the Sea of Cortez. Extending parallel to the Baja Coast is a series of islands. Some of these have been separated from the Baja Peninsula and the Mexican mainland for 1 to 4 million years. On one of these islands, Catalan, it is possible to observe the kind of evidence that led Darwin to formulate his theory of evolution. On Catalan, there are a number of plants and animals that occur nowhere else. The most startling is the giant barrel cactus. On another series of islands, the Galapagos, Darwin observed that if the populations of a given species become isolated long enough, each population can develop its own traits. The islands of the Sea of Cortez are not far enough from the mainland to show this evolutionary effect, except in one family of animals, reptiles. The land reptiles, lizards and snakes, cannot navigate the waters between the islands and the mainland. Most striking on Catalan is the emerald tail lizard, a variation of the side-blotched lizard. Here on the island, it has evolved a bright green coloration. The last day of our trip brought us into Los Islotes Island. This was one of Steinbeck and Ricketts' most successful collecting stations. And it was here we hoped to swim with the California sea lions.
In terms of being in the water with the sea lions, they're just, stay away from the big bulls that are on territory. No one's ever been bit here that I know of, but so it's pretty safe. Very exciting, especially if the young ones come out. They do double back flips in front of you and then wait for you to do something,
Oh, that's neat.
Sea lions are the talented performers of the circus and sea world, but they are not known for being particularly friendly in their own domain. Some of the yearlings had gill nets around their necks. It was hard not to reach out to these doomed souls, for as they grew, the nets would strangle the life from them. Then, we were in the water.
definitely an intense experience. At first, it's kind of scary as they're coming at you, but after that, it's so fascinating. You're just going with them.
We went in close to shore, and they were coming at us, and that makes you a little uneasy. But then you go out a little bit, and you're swimming with them. I mean, they're there.
It was just amazing that they would come up to you and just zip down underneath your body. They're just so in control of their realm. You haven't got a chance. By the time you've looked underneath your legs to see what they're doing, they're gone. Marvelous, fantastic, highlight of the trip.
That evening, a spectacular sunset surrounded us as we waited for our last gathering. The bonfire that would symbolize the end of our trip, soon to be just part of our consciousness.
Trying to remember the Gulf is like trying to recreate a dream. This is by no means a sentimental thing. It has little to do with beauty or even conscious liking. But the Gulf does draw one. If it were lush and rich, one could understand the pull. But it is fierce and hostile and sullen. But we know we must go back if we live, and we don't know why. This is PBS.